You've been trained to look for the wrong buyer and it's costing you every single day. Now, here's what they don't teach you. Fast growth businesses are exceptional at one very important thing: knowing how to find clients who immediately need their services and are ready to invest right now. Those are the clients who throw money at problems because they value their time. They're the ones who reach out already convinced, saying, I need exactly what you do. When can we get started? And instead, right now, you're buried in discovery calls with people who ghost after your proposal. You're justifying your prices to people who are never actually going to invest, and you're closing 2 out of 10 calls when you should be closing 7. The difference is they're not simply targeting people who can afford them. They're tracking the people who are ready to invest in them. And the difference is intent. So in this episode, I'm going to break down the DNA messaging system and the 3 drivers that determine whether or not someone will actually buy. So by the end, you'll know exactly the messaging system that filters out tire kickers and brings in clients who are ready right now. Now, hey, and welcome back to the Business Real Talk. I'm your host, Echeverria, and I'm the founder of the Easy Yes Method, and I help established service businesses stop competing and start leading their industries through business innovation and a self-selling bingeable system. Now, last week, we talked about why your business needs a system that supports your best buyer and how the Binge and Buy podcast system helps those fast buyers make fast decisions. So today, we're going to dive into the next logical question. How do you actually find those ready buyers in the first place? Because it's one thing to have a system that converts your best buyers, and it's another thing to actually find the people who are ready to invest right now. And that's where the messaging becomes your engine. So in this episode, we're going to break down how DNA messaging helps you identify, attract, and filter for high intent buyers, the ones who are actively looking for someone exactly like you. So let's get real. You're successful, but that doesn't mean that you don't want to improve your approach. You don't just want to focus on getting more leads. You want ready buyers, the ones who know what they want, have the means to get it, and are actively looking for someone to help them do it right now. Those are the ones who are going to end up showing up saying, this is exactly what I've been looking for, pay you in full, and refer all their friends to you. But right now, if we're being completely honest, that's not what's showing up. Instead, you're seeing inquiries from people who say, this sounds really interesting, but let me get back to you, or right now is not the right time. All things where they never actually do. And you're constantly justifying your pricing, explaining your value, defending why you cost what you cost. And you and your team are closing 20, maybe 30% of your calls when you really should be closing 70%. And here's the thing. When you get this right people on a call, they're in. Your close rate with those buyers is sky high, but you can't seem to figure out what you're missing to bring in more of those right people. So if you're like most established business owners, you've been told the solution is simple. You're given advice that's going to fall into one of these traps. The first one is the financial means trap. Now, the myth around this is if you target people who can afford you, you'll end up finding your best clients. And the logic seems really sound. If you target high net worth, affluent people, they'll end up buying, but it ends up failing because income doesn't equal readiness. Just because someone has money doesn't mean that they're ready to spend it with you, nor does it mean that they're prioritizing the problem that you actually solve. So you end up with wealthy tire kickers who want to explore options but never actually commit. Yeah, they can afford you, but they don't necessarily need or want what you have to offer. So affluence doesn't mean interested. Now, the second trap is what I call the overhead trap, where you are told that you need to talk to more people, qualify them through your process, and then the right ones will rise to the top. The logic is that more leads equals more clients, that if you cast a wider net and you qualify harder, you're going to be able to close the good ones. But this fails because qualification alone only filters what's already coming in. It can't manufacture intent. You're burning time, energy, and resources having discovery calls, having your team do follow-ups, marketing to people who aren't ready to buy. So 80% of your conversations end up being with people who will never convert, no matter how good your pitch is. And you really want you or your team to be taking 20 calls a month just to be closing 3 to 4, all because 75% of those calls were never high intent buyers to begin with. You can't filter your way to ready buyers. Now, the third and final trap is the pressure trap. This idea that if you create urgency, discounts, limited spots, deadlines, that you can push them to decide. Now, the thinking is if they're on the fence, give them a reason to act right now. So scarcity, FOMO, time limited bonuses. But it ends up failing because you're not going to be able to pressure someone into clarity. Pressure tactics attract buyers who have FOMO and not intent. And it creates resentment, refunds, and resistance because you're training your market that you're desperate, which ends up tanking your positioning. So you're trying to force a buying state instead of attracting it. Now, can you see the pattern? They're all focusing on capacity, whether someone can buy, not intent, whether they're ready to buy. So you're looking at their money, their profile, their responses to your tactics, but none of that actually tells you if they're gonna pull the trigger. The only thing that predicts whether someone will actually buy is intent. That's why the answer to finding clients who immediately need your services and are ready to invest isn't targeting capacity, it's messaging for intent. So how do you actually spot intent? Because intent isn't vague. It's not a feeling, it's calculated and measurable. And it shows up in three key drivers: desire, need, and action. When all three are present, you're looking at a high intent buyer. But when even one is missing, you're looking at someone who will waste your time and has zero intention of buying. Now, here's the reality: you can't manufacture intent, but you can attract it. You can design your messaging so that you're bringing people in who already have that level of intent ready. That's where DNA messaging comes in. So let me break down for you how and why it works, starting with the first key driver, desire. Now, most people end up confusing interest with desire. So interest is this sounds cool. Desire is I'm committed to making this happen. And the difference between that is that someone with interest might say something like, I'd love to grow my business. But someone with desire says, I need to hit 500K this year. I'm currently at 200,000 and I have 7 months. Desire isn't vague or aspirational. It's specific, measurable, and really emotionally charged. This really matters for you because of something called goal specificity bias. So studies show that people with vague goals, something like I want to be healthier, are 42% less likely to follow through than with people who have specific goals. Things like I need to lose 15 pounds before my wedding in June. The brain doesn't activate for vague wishes. It activates for specific commitments. So I want you to think about the last time you really wanted something, not the thing that would be nice, but the thing that you knew you needed. Maybe it was a car because yours kept breaking down. You weren't just interested in a new car. You were hunting for a reliable car that would run for thousands of miles without a breakdown. That's desire. It's specific, it's urgent, it's non-negotiable. Now, most messaging is geared towards interest instead of specific desire. So it looks like want to be financially secure. That's going to attract wanderers. People who think, yeah, someday I need that. But instead, if you said ready to build 18 months of runway so you can finally stop worrying about covering payroll, that's going to attract hunters, people who think that's exactly where I am and exactly what I need. Now, a great example of this was my client Steph, who was a branding strategist, and she was attracting 50 inquiries a month with messaging that said, want a brand that stands out. Now, of the 50 people she was bringing in, only 2 to 3 were ever really ready to invest. So we rebuilt her messaging and spoke to helping luxury brands create a $100,000 experience their buyers can brag about. Now, while her inquiry volume dropped down to 15 a month, her close rate went from 4% to 60%. Same offer, different filter. So in your messaging, you call out the specific outcome they're committed to. So let me give you some examples. One is helping founders close Series A funding in 60 days with airtight contracts that protect your IP without scaring investors. You can see how specific that is and really speaks to a desire someone has. Now, here's another one. Taking service business owners from $300,000 solopreneurs to $1 million with a team so you can step back without your revenue dropping. You're not promising vague growth, hoping someone relates. You're naming the exact transformation they're already committed to achieving. And this is where psychology gets interesting because specificity creates recognition. When someone with specific desire sees your message and thinks that's exactly what I need, their brain ends up releasing dopamine, not because you convinced them, but because you named exactly what they were already thinking. And that recognition creates instant connection, and connection accelerates decisions. So desire filters for people who know exactly what they want. Now, here's the problem. Wanting something alone is not enough. You can talk to someone who desperately wants to hit $500,000 this year. They're committed. They have a timeline. They have this specific desire. But if they can think to themselves that I can figure this out on my own, they won't end up buying from you. They'll keep trying DIY solutions. That's where the next driver comes in on need. So I want you to think about the last time you took your car to a mechanic. You didn't go to that mechanic because your car was broken in a super obvious way, like you had a flat tire that you could see. You went because your car was making a weird noise and you didn't know what it was. Because if you knew it was the spark plugs, you'd buy spark plugs and fix it yourself. But because you can't diagnose it, you need an expert who can. That's need. You can see the symptom, but you can't diagnose the cause. Need is this idea of gap awareness. It's when someone actually knows that something isn't working, but they can't actually figure out what it is. So they're not oblivious or in denial. They can clearly see that there's a problem. They just can't diagnose what the solution might be. So let me give you an example of what this might look like. As a therapist, you might say, my practice is full and I'm totally burnt out. I know I need to change something about how I'm working, but I'm not 100% sure how and what needs to happen. That's a need. They see that there's a gap, but they can't figure out what the solution is. And this matters because of something called diagnostic dependency. People aren't just buying solutions, they're buying from people who can diagnose what they can't diagnose themselves. That diagnostic gap is what creates that urgency for people to want to be able to buy. So let's take a look at the difference between a low intent need and a high intent need. So a low intent need looks like, I wish I had more clients. A high intent need looks like, I'm getting 30 discovery calls a month, but I'm only closing 3. I've looked at my pricing, my process, my follow-up. I can't figure out where the heck the breakdown is. Now, one is this vague dissatisfaction. The other is a very specific gap that they've examined, but still can't solve for. Now, the trap that a lot of messaging around this falls into is that it tries to create awareness of a gap instead of speaking to people who already have that gap awareness. So let me give you an example. So in low intent messaging, where you're trying to create the gap, you might say things like, here's 10 reasons why your gut health matters in your 40s. You're trying to convince someone that they should pay attention to their gut health when it's not necessarily something that's top of mind for them. They haven't actually identified the problem for themselves. Versus with high intent messaging, it names an existing gap that's already there. So you've tried probiotics, elimination diets, and digestive enzymes, but the bloating and fatigue just won't go away. And no doctor can seem to figure out why. Can you see the difference? One is trying to convince them that they have a problem in the first place, and the other speaking directly to people who already know they have a problem. They just can't solve it alone. So I'll give you a great example. I had a client who's a financial advisor, and they were using problem creation messaging. So all of their content was like the hidden mistakes that business owners make with cash flow. So they ended up getting attention, lots of engagement, people saying, wow, I never really thought about that, but they were getting 0 consultation requests. The reason why was because they were creating awareness of problems that people didn't actually know that they had. And awareness without an existing frustration doesn't drive action. So we ended up shifting her messaging to name the existing gap awareness. So let me give you an example. You hit $3 million in revenue, but your bank account doesn't reflect it. You know profit and cash flow aren't the same thing, but you can't figure out where the heck the money is going. So from that shift, her engagement dropped, but her consultation request went up 5 times because she stopped attracting curious people and started attracting people with gap awareness who were frustrated but couldn't close it. That is the power of needs-based messaging. You're not solving a surface problem, you're diagnosing what they couldn't diagnose themselves. When you name the gap that they can see but can't solve, you end up proving that you have a solution. Because if you can see what they can't see, you can fix what they can't fix. That's why high intent buyers reach out immediately when their gap is named clearly. They're not looking for more information, they're looking for the person who can finally show them what they've been missing. So need filters for people who have gap awareness, but again, awareness is just not enough. You need all 3 drivers. You can talk to someone who knows exactly what's broken, see the gap, they're frustrated they can't solve it, but if they're not actively doing anything about it, they're going to be stuck in analysis paralysis. And we see this a lot. So they'll say things like, I'm just going to keep thinking about it. They're researching, they're getting clear on it, but they're not actually ready to invest. That's where action comes in. Action is about momentum. So it's not about someone saying, you know what, I should probably do something about this. It's about someone who's already trying to do something about it. They're not thinking, they're not researching, they're already in motion. So here's what this looks like. I want you to think about someone who says, you know what, I should probably start working out versus someone who says, I've hired 2 trainers in the last year. I bought a Peloton. I tried keto and intermittent fasting, and I'm still not seeing the results. I'm running out of ideas. Now, which one of those people do you think is more likely to hire you and actually follow through? The second one, not because they want it more, but because they're already in motion. Action orientation is the difference between intention and investment. Low action people have great intentions. They want to solve their problem. They just haven't committed resources to it yet. Versus high action people have already invested time, money, energy. They're not window shopping. They're actively trying solution. And this works because of something called the sunk cost fallacy. When someone has already invested in trying to solve a problem, they're psychologically primed to keep investing until they solve it because they're not starting from 0. They're already mid through the process. They're frustrated. They're trying to figure out what actually works. So let me give you an example of low action. Low action is, I need to work on my marketing. I should probably fix my messaging. I've been thinking about hiring help. Versus high action is, I've rewritten my website 3 times. I've hired 2 copywriters. I've taken a $5,000 messaging course. My positioning is clearer, but the conversions still haven't moved. One has intention, the other has investment. Now, here's what makes action messaging so powerful. It's not just about acknowledging that they've tried things, okay? It's about diagnosing why those things they've tried didn't work and revealing what's missing. This is where most people get it wrong. They'll say things like, you've tried X and it didn't work, and they'll stop there. But high intent buyers don't just want validation that their efforts ended up failing. They want to understand why. Because if you can diagnose why their attempts didn't work, you can prove that you've been the solution that they've been missing all along. So think about it like this. If you went to 3 doctors and none of them could fix your back pain, you end up frustrated. Now, if you walked into the 4th doctor and the 4th doctor simply said, hey, I can fix it, you'd probably walk out, because how do you know they can fix it? You've already gone through this before. It all sounds exactly the same. You've lacked that trust. And nonetheless, if you can't see how it can work, you've moved on. Now, instead, let's say that you go to a 4th doctor and they say you tried physical therapy, medication, and rest, but hey, the reason those things didn't work was because your pain actually isn't muscular, it's structural. You have a herniated disc that needs a different approach. Now you're sold, not because they criticized other doctors, but because they explained why those approaches didn't work and what you actually need. That's the pattern. Action taken, why it didn't work, what's actually missing. This ends up doing 3 things. 1, it validates that their investments, they weren't in the wrong to try. 2, it provides diagnostic insight. It explains the real problem. And 3, it positions your solution as the answer, because you have what they've been missing all along. So instead of saying, want to stand out in your industry, it becomes you've rebranded twice, you've repositioned 3 times and hired a marketing agency, but you're still competing on price and justifying your value. That's because brand differentiation doesn't solve commoditization. You're still operating in a category where you're compared to everyone else. What you actually need is category ownership, where you're not just an expert of many, you're the authority in the space that you define. You're not positioning yourself as another option. You're now the answer that they've been searching for, the knight in shining armor. So action is going to filter for people who are already moving and in motion and ready for the right direction. So here's what most people don't understand. You need all 3 of these to work together. Desire without need or action means that they want it. They think they can figure it out themselves. So they'll consume your free content forever, but never actually invest. Now, desire plus need without action, they want it. They know they need your help, but they're still researching options and they end up in analysis paralysis. So they'll think about it indefinitely. Versus when you have desire, need, and action, that trifecta means that they want a specific outcome. They know that what they're missing something, and they've already tried multiple approaches that haven't worked. That's a ready to invest buyer, the one who needs your services immediately right now. This is the power behind DNA messaging, because we can quite literally target the 3 drivers of intent and bring in people who are ready to make buying decisions right now. This is how you find the buyers in your market who need your services immediately. So rather than sitting in your pipeline for months or years or weeks, you have people who end up saying yes in a matter of hours, and you end up with the best clients possible. Now, this is just one single piece inside of my ECS method, because attracting the right buyer is step 1. But what you actually need is the full system that allows you to become the only solution in your market, create a bingeable solution that actually gets those buyers to sell themselves, and then have a solution to their problem that allows them to get world-class results. So let me break it down for you, starting with step 1, what I call innovation gap methodology. Now, your best clients are not looking for another take on the same thing. They're searching for a breakthrough that's going to make them say, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. So while most business owners are fighting for attention, smart experts have learned how to make their competition irrelevant. This is where the innovation gap methodology comes in, because we are creating a category defining theory that creates your own blue ocean, where you make your competition irrelevant. You're no longer fighting for attention. You're no longer fighting for space or competing based on price. You're creating a process that actually creates demand and gets people coming to you. So we work together with our clients to develop this so that you truly have something that is your IP asset and sells for you. This isn't positioning. It's not differentiation. It's category creation. So you're not just one option. You're the only option for high intent buyers. So instead of chasing and convincing, you're creating demand where clients are seeking you out. They instantly see your value and they invest without hesitation. This step alone allows my clients to 5 to 10x their prices and have clients who line up to work with them. Now, the second step in the process is the bingeable decision system. This is how you turn browsers into buyers. Now, once you've attracted the right buyers, you need a system that actually converts them fast. So I want you to think about how Netflix gets you to binge an entire series without taking any breaks. You become obsessed. You sell yourself on it with every episode that you watch. Now, I want you to imagine that your buyers did the same thing with you. That is the bingeable decision system. It mirrors the natural decision process every buyer goes through. So they're binging their way through your sales system, selling themselves on you at every single step. No more chasing, no more months of back and forth, just a simple system that gets your leads to sell themselves. So by the time they reach out, they're not exploring options, they're begging to get on your calendar. Now, the third and final step is knowing how to create what we call a happy client machine. Now, marketing gets people in the door, but if you can't deliver on the promises that you make and give them world-class results consistently without you being the bottleneck, your business won't scale. That's where the happy client machine comes in. It's the systematic approach to delivering on your promise and creating raving fans without it being fully reliant on you. So your clients are singing your praises while you actually get to enjoy your life. This is where your reputation and your work end up becoming your best sales process. That is the easiest method, where we're building your systems, your strategies, and your innovation so that you become not only the most talked about expert, but the most bought from expert in your space. So if you're an action taker and you want to see how this can apply within your business, I want you to apply for a growth optimization call by heading on over to easyesleads.com/call. Now, on this call, you and I will sit down, we'll look through what your current client acquisition process looks like, how you're currently being positioned within the market, and I'll show you how we can actually create category defining theory around your work and be able to create a system that sells itself. So if you want to learn more about how to do that, again, head on over to easyesleads.com/call to book your call. Now, if you're new around here or you just want to learn a little bit more about how we've leveraged the Netflix effect to create a self-selling bingeable system, you can check out our on-demand mini series right now by heading on over to thenetflixeffect.com. Inside of this, we break down the 3 steps that turn your method into a movement and your entire IP into a self-selling system. Now, if you found today's episode helpful, and our goal here is that you're thinking differently about what it actually means to attract the right buyers, I would love and appreciate if you could take 1 second out of your already busy day to rate, subscribe, and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. But until next time, here's to keeping it real.